Hello everyone. Today we are going to start chapter number 8, which is titled as Consumer Attitude Formation and Change. In this chapter, we are going to highlight what are attitudes, how these attitudes are formed, what are different structural models of attitude, and what are the strategies of attitude changes, and how behavior can proceed or follow attitude formation. So we look into them one by one. First of all, let's look at what are attitudes. So, an attitude is basically a learned predisposition or tendency to behave in a consistently favorable or unfavorable manner with respect to a given object. And here, what we need to understand that we have seen that consumers they have either a favorable or unfavorable attitude towards object. And what are those objects? From the context of consumer behavior, uh, an object can be a product, brand, service, price, package, advertisement, promotional medium, or the retailer selling the product, among many other aspects of the consumption. So we've seen that many a times we have very much positive attitude towards certain products, certain brands, certain service, towards certain type of price that has been set for a product, for a package, for an advertisement, for any promotional medium, or the retailer selling the product. So we need to understand that the different aspects of consumption for which consumer they may have a very favorable or unfavorable attitude towards that. Okay, now we need to understand that these attitudes basically they're learned. These are actually cognitions and they're learned by the consumer from their direct experience with the product, like when they are using these products during that course of experience they form these attitudes about towards the product. For example, if you use a certain kind of a product, for example, if you have bought for example, a kind of a new detergent, and when you start using that detergent, there is going to be an attitude formation by using that detergent because it makes your clothes very clean. It brings a good fragrance in your clothes. So one way of learning attitude is through direct experience, and then by many a times we haven't used the product, we haven't experienced the product, but the people living around us they generate quite a positive word of mouth regarding the product, or either through exposure to the mass media. You have seen an advertisement, and that advertisement has formed your attitude towards the product and the brand. And then the finally the other information sources through different either website, through blog, or while reading a review about a product in an editorial, you form your attitude towards the product. So we need to understand that these attitudes they reflect either favorable or unfavorable evaluations of the product, of the attitude object, and motivate consumers to either buy or not to buy the particular product or brand. So these basically attitudes they are reflecting our evaluations. These evaluations, like when we are evaluating different products either through use by either through hearing by someone else, it's by the either we have a favorable evaluations or unfavorable evaluations towards the object, and it motivate consumers either they go and buy the product or either they avoid the product, they do not buy the product or the brand. So it's basically what we need to understand is like attitude is something that leads to the behavior. If you have a favorable attitude or favorable evaluations of a certain product, you will definitely go out and buy that product. And if you have an unfavorable or you don't have a positive attitude about the product, you're not going to buy that product. So it's like the product attitude that we have in our mind for that particular object or for the product leads us to behavior. So how we are going to behave, either we are going to buy the product or we are going to buy the product, basically depends upon our attitude towards the product. So in this advertisement, the company Sneaker basically they are introducing a new product, and they are basically targeting the consumer who like these peanut butter cups, peanut butter chocolate cups, and they are basically saying that these if the people those who like this peanut butter chocolate cups, they'll be more fonder towards this Snickers squared, which is basically chocolate and peanut butter in the sneaker. And they are saying that it is more love, and the people will be more fonder because they like this peanut butter cups. And this way, basically, company is trying to capitalize on the fact that the consumer, those who already like these peanut butter chocolate cups, they'll favor sneakers as well. So they are trying to form an attitude of a new product that they are introducing in the market. And many a times we need to understand that the marketers, they try to associate attitudes, or they want to form attitudes by associating products with different events or with different cultural events. In this another advertisements of sneaker, they are basically associating the sneaker with the event, or the with this Easter. So they are saying like the original sneakers taste in a shape we ripped off from the Easter. So peanuts and caramel wrapped in a chocolate egg. It's Easter only more satisfying. So they have this campaign of sneaker as more satisfying, in which one of the advertisement that they released on the Easter was this, like they were trying to form positive attitudes of consumer towards this chocolate. Now, this is another advertisement for saying calcium with the emphasis on yum. So, like this advertisement is basically an attempt to change the attitude towards the calcium in a soft drink situation. So now let's look into uh, how these attitudes are basically formed. Now we need to understand that when we are talking about attitudes, they are basically cognitions, and they're not easily observable. So these attitudes are actually in consumer black boxes in consumer minds, but researchers, they assess them. We don't know what is the person's attitude towards a particular product and object. It can be reflected in their behavior, but we cannot easily observe what's in their mind. So, but researchers, they assess them by asking questions or inferences from behavior. So that I already have said, that is basically reflected in their behavior. So either we make inferences by asking questions to them, or either by looking at their behavior. And we need to understand that these attitudes are always directed towards object, like towards products, different product categories, different brands, services, different promotional messages, websites, media, retailer, and many other entities. And consumers, they maybe have a positive attitude towards a product, or they may have a negative attitude or unfavorable attitude towards the product. And here we need to understand that basically attitudes, they lead to the behavior, and they're not synonymous with the behavior. At times you may have a negative attitude towards a product, but in certain situation or in certain context, you may even buy that product beside the fact that you have a negative attitude towards a product. Sometimes we need to understand that attitudes reflect either favorable or unfavorable evaluation of the attitude object, which might or might not lead to the behavior. So, attitudes might propel consumers towards a particular behavior or repel them away from such. So, at times, it is basically leading consumers towards a certain kind of behavior, or they may basically uh, leading consumer to avoid the product. Now let's look into the phenomena of consumers learning the attitudes. Now we need to understand that the consumers, they basically form new attitudes, and they also change the existing attitude. It's mean that once an attitude that has been formed, that may be changed over the period of time through different experiences and through different information exposures. Now here we need to understand that consumers, they often form positive attitudes towards a new item. People, when they are basically trying new products, they form attitude towards those products. And many a times consumer, they form positive attitudes because they have already tried different products of the same brand already, and they have been repeatedly buying them, and they have been already satisfied with them. So for a product that is being introduced as a product line extension, or as a new product, entirely new product, but with the same old brand name, it will have a positive attitude because the consumer previous experience with the product was really good, with the brand was really good. The consumers, they often try new products, new product models, and different brands. And we need to understand if such a trial basically meets or exceed consumer expectations, they will develop an automatically they'll develop a positive attitudes or a favorable attitude towards those objects. Generally, the more information consumers they have about a product or a service, the more it's likely that they are going to form an attitude towards it, either a positive attitude or negative attitude. So the amount of information is basically related with the attitude formation. However, if the product is basically irrelevant to the consumer, then they will not cognitively process the information that they are exposed to. So here we need to understand that the consumer, they will only form attitudes towards those objects in which they are interested. And if there is any product for which they are not interested or that is irrelevant to them, they are not going to form any attitude formation towards them. So, furthermore, we also need to understand that consumers often use only a limited amount of information for the formation of attitude, and less importantly, beliefs carry little weight, and therefore, advertisements should be focused on the key points that differentiate products from competitors and not detail too many of the product feature. So it's basically they are talking about that when you're marketing your products, your product position must be highlighted or the points of differentiation, like what unique propositions or unique features that are embedded in your product that will basically help in forming the attitude. We need to understand that the consumers, they there are certain beliefs that are important to them, and there are certain beliefs that carry little weight. So the advertiser or the company, they must highlight just those beliefs in the advertisements which are important to the consumer and they are helpful in shaping the consumer attitude rather than putting all the information in the advertisements. And they should also, the marketers or the consumer behavior analysts, they must understand that how do consumers form their initial attitude towards any product. For example, Calvin Klein perfume, and they should also understand consumer that where they are going to go and buy this product from, which retail outlet, or either they're going to a supermarket or they're going to a Walmart, where they're going from, where they're basically purchasing that product, and how do family members and friends, admired celebrities, mass media advertisements, and even cultural membership, they influence the youngsters' attitudes about buying such fragrances, and why do attitude persist for a long time while others changes? Why do some attitudes they last for more uh, time period, or why they're long lasting, whereas there are certain attitudes they basically may disappear? And a marketer must know that the answers to such questions in order to influence the applicable attitudes. Now we are going to discuss the sources and factors that play a role in determining consumer attitude towards marketing objects. Let's look into the different sources of attitude formation. The attitudes basically they are formed either through personal experience when consumers they are using this product during the course of this experience, they form their attitudes either positive or negative. Many times it's a family, they are talking good about the product or they are generating positive word of mouth, and that basically forms your attitude towards a product. There are certain friends those who are maybe a reason of your attitude formation because they are talking good about the product or they have a good experience with the product and that you have observed. And many times it's a media that is telling you that this product is good, and that helps in shaping their attitude towards a product or service. And at times it's the information on the internet. And nowadays one of the strongest phenomena is the social media, and it is strongly affecting the consumers attitudes because in there are consumers to consumer interactions, there is company to consumer experience that is taking place on social media. There are ratings, there are reviews, and there is either a lot of positive word of mouth or there's a negative word of mouth. They basically affect the attitude formation. So if you look at the what is the primary source, that is definitely the consumer's direct experience in trying and evaluating the products and the services. Now, if consumer try and like the product, they will form positive attitudes and buy them again. And in addition to personal experience, the family strongly impacts person's initial shopping related attitudes. For instance, young children who were rewarded for good behavior with sweet foods and candy often retain a taste for and positive attitude towards sweets as adults. And now the marketers, they increasingly use online advertising to shape the attitudes of small and specialized consumer niches, because new technologies enable them to customize advertising message and also some products. So you need to understand that the one of the most strongest point of this online advertising or online marketing is it is basically targeted. So it has these potential to reach different niches and then customize their products and advertising messages according to the consumer taste and their needs. Now, basically, the online marketers, they have this capacity to target consumers on the basis of their demographics, psychographics, and geodemographics profiles with personalized product offerings, like watches or sets of golf club for left-handed people, and message demonstrating that they understand consumer special needs and desire. So, targeted online marketing can shape attitudes more effectively than other media because the promotional message address the need and concerns of precise micro segment. So the power of this social media or the power of this online media is basically, this is a world of data science, and it's about digital marketing, and this data science or web analytics or this Google analytics has basically is kind of a magic that basically tells you who your consumer is, what are the previous products that they are buying or they are looking for, and they basically these analytics helps us to reach to the targeted consumers. Those are actually looking for the kind of products that we are selling, and we have their profiles online with us, their previous purchases, their clicks, what they're looking for. So according to their taste and the previous information, we can basically customize not just our advertising messages but also our offerings to the consumers. Now let's look at the role that personality plays, or the personality traits or factors they play in forming attitudes. Now the personality traits, they significantly influence the formation of attitudes. We have a very good example of individuals who have this high need for cognition, and they basically are looking for a lot of information. They crave for information and they enjoy thinking. So such kind of consumers are likely to form positive attitudes in response to promotions that are talking a lot about those who have this detailed information about the product or product attributes and its feature. And in contrast, we have other consumers, those who have relatively low need for this cognition. So for these kind of consumers, they will form positive attitudes in response to ads that those are actually featuring either attractive models or celebrities or other peripheral cues about the product advertised rather than the cues related to the product. So attitude towards new products are particularly influenced by personality characteristics related to one's innovativeness. Now let's look into the attitudes are consistent with behavior. Similarly, we also need to understand that similar attitudes, they consistently lead to same behaviors. However, despite their consistency, uh, attitudes are not permanent and they can be changed either seldom or frequently. So here we need to understand that attitudes, they consistently lead to the same behavior. Means if you have positive behavior, you have a positive attitude that will lead to the positive behavior, you'll keep on buying the product. And if you have unfavorable attitude towards the product, you'll keep on ignoring the product, avoiding the product. And they're saying that despite there is a consistency, but it is not that these attitudes are permanent. They can change either seldom or frequently. Now, um, for example, a study showed that Mexican consumers prefer Japanese cars over Korean automobiles. We would expect that a Mexican consumer will buy Japanese car when he replaces his current vehicle. However, circumstances often disrupt the consistency between attitudes and behavior. For example, a Mexican consumer might be unable to afford the car he prefers and buy the Korean car instead. In this case, affordability is a situation factor. So we need to understand that situations, they also basically affect our attitude. So attitude occurs within situation, and attitudes occur within and are affected by the situations. In this context, situations are events and circumstances that influence the relationship between attitudes and behaviors at particular times. Situations can cause consumers to behave in a way seemingly inconsistent with their attitude. I want to buy something, I have a very positive attitude towards that, but I don't have an affordability. I'm not going to buy that product. So, we have different structural models of attitude, like tri-component attitude model, multi-attribute attitude model, the trying to consumer model, and the attitude towards the ad model. Now we look into them one by one. First of all, we have this tri-component attitude model, and here in this model we have three different components. The first is the cognitive component, then we have the affective component, and finally the cognitive component. So the cognitive component is basically it consists of consumers or the person's cognitions, that is the knowledge and the perceptions of the features of an attitude object that a person acquired either through direct experience or through related information from various sources. So in this case, we are going to take an example of two different TV technologies and we'll probe into that. So it is basically this knowledge and the perception commonly are expressed as beliefs, and that is the consumer believes that the attitude object possesses or does not possess specific features. So now this basically figure 6.2, it illustrates the beliefs of a hypothetical consumer about two different technologies. So let's discuss this. Let's take a break and discuss this. And the effective component, that is the second component of tri-component model, it represents the consumer emotions and feelings about a particular product or the attitude object, and this basically is considered as evaluations because they capture his or her global assessment of the attitude object, that is the extent to which the individual rates the attitude object as favorable or unfavorable, good or bad. So the effect laden experience also manifests themselves as emotionally charged states. Example: happiness, sadness, shame, disgust, anger, distress, guilt, or surprise. These and other emotional states may enhance or amplify the experience itself as well as the subsequent recollections. For instance, if a person visiting a shopping center feels particularly joyous during shopping, there he'll spend more time doing so and recall that with great pleasure the time that has been spent at the shopping center. In addition, he may encourage his friends to visit the center. Now let's look into this table 6.3, measuring consumers' feeling and emotions about Aramis aftershave. So it's like we are rating them. From the past 30 years, you have had a chance to try Aramis aftershave. We would appreciate if you would identify how your face felt after using product during these 50 during this 30-day trial period. For each of the word below, mark X in the box corresponding to how your face felt after using Aramis. So they are basically gauging the consumer's feelings and emotions, like are they relaxed, attractive looking, tight, smooth, supple. It's like they are ranging from very much to the not at all. So this way we can measure the affective component of the consumer. Now let's look into this uh, table 6.4. Another measure of person's emotions towards an object that is shown in table 6.4 is basically a semantic differential scale, which is a type of rating scale consisting of a series of bipolar adjectives, that is like good and bad, pleasant, unpleasant, anchored on a continuum. And many researchers believe that a person's attitude can be derived directly from the measure, because presumably the scales reflect beliefs, cognition, as well as emotion towards the object, attitude object. So semantic differential scale measuring consumer attitude towards RMS aftershave, they are like, it's refreshing, not refreshing, it's pregnant, it is pregnant, it's not pregnant, it's pleasant, it's unpleasant, it's appealing to others and unappealing. So consumer will rate their emotions somewhere from 1 to 7 in this scale. Now let's look into the last part, that is the cognitive part of this tri-component model. So in this, basically the cognitive component, it reflects the likelihood that an individual will undertake a specific action or behave in a particular way with regard to attitude object. In consumer research, the cognitive component is treated as an expression of the consumer's intention to buy. Buying intention scales are used to assess the likelihood of the consumer purchasing a product or behaving in a certain way. And the table 6.5 in your book shows the examples of intention to buy measures. That is, interestingly, consumers who are asked to respond to an intention to buy question appears to be more likely to actually make a brand purchase for positively evaluated brands. I will buy it, as contrasted with the consumers who are not asked to respond to an intention question. This suggests that a positive brand commitment in the form of positive answer to an attitude intention question positively affects the actual brand purchase.